Gosh, okay, well that's a good way to get us started. I didn't realize you looked on the water there.
You can cut that out.
Okay. I'll cut it right out. But welcome back to another episode of R4E. I hope you all are having a great day so far, wherever you're listening from. I'm very excited to share today's guest with you. It is Chef Leslie Durso. Leslie, we had a chance to get plugged in back when I was at Fair a couple of years ago, and we can dive into that story here. But before we do, your walk-up song was "Lose Yourself" by the infamous Eminem. You had another one that you also mentioned, but I'd love to hear why "Lose Yourself" is your walk-up song, and we'll go from there.
It's the greatest hype song that ever was. I mean, there's nothing that gets you more pumped up than that song. And if you saw the movie 8 Mile too, it's just about the hustle and the struggle and the pushing through anything and making your dreams come true. So, I mean, what better way to walk up to a baseball home plate and smack one out of the park than listening to that song?
Like I said before we started filming, you're not the first guest, and you mentioned probably won't be the last to select the song for good reason. I didn't know you had any background in softball, and that was just a good coincidence there. So maybe we start there. So you said you played softball for a couple of years growing up. Walk us through where you grew up, and maybe we'll round out all the way to playing "Lose Yourself" as the outro. But where'd you end up growing up? I know you're in the LA area now, but where's
I'm a Southern California native. I grew up in San Diego, and yeah, I loved sports as a kid. I just loved being outside. I wasn't the biggest fan of school, but I just loved anything outside, anything physical. And I played softball my entire life. I was a catcher. I played in an adult league until it got too competitive and crazy. And somebody slid into me and scratched up my face. And I was like, okay, I'm done with adult softball. But I coached as well. I have a much younger sister, and I coached her team for a long time. And I love softball. It was also what got me into into the entertainment industry as a kid too. I worked for the Padres. I was kind of a face of the fans for them. And I would run out, do the pregame, interview people during the game on the Jumbotron. And it was just so fun. And I'd go around to all the news stations and radio stations and tell them what was going on at the ballpark that weekend. It was really, really a fun job. And so that kind of got me in front of the camera and that bug going, and launched my career from there. My first career from there.
Fantastic. Well, so like I said before, we initially got plugged in when I was at Fair. I saw your Around the World in 80 Plate segments before I joined the organization. And for those of you who don't know, Fair is the largest private funder of food allergy research. I myself have had food allergies my whole life. And so a couple of parallels, and really why I was excited to have you on the show, Leslie, is one, my food allergy, and I've also been a vegetarian my whole life. So my dietary restrictions, one, is a lot of parallels there. And then two,
what are your, do you want to share? Do you want to share your allergies?
Let's dive into. I'm allergic to tree nuts and sesame seeds.
Oh, okay. Those aren't too bad.
No, I think that, and I've talked about this a lot, but I think sesame seeds has turned out to be the more challenging of the two, because a lot of people don't realize that tahini is sesame, or even so. I mean, obviously someone in your role knows that, and we can jump into why that is now, or in a moment. But sesame has tended to be the more difficult of the two, just because it is a little bit more limiting, especially with some of the Asian dishes. But all that's to say, I've had it on my list of goals for the year. I'm every night as I'm going to bed, I'm visualizing and thinking through eating a cannoli covered with pistachios and tofu crusted, or sesame crusted tofu. So I'm thinking about it. I'm visualizing it, because I know I'm going to be able. I think that all of the great work that Fair and all these other organizations are doing is going to help me and anyone else with food allergies bypass that down the road. But I'm also trying to do that in tandem as well.
Good. Yeah, it is. The work that they're doing is so important. And I was so excited to be part of that organization, because I also have food allergies. And again,
I didn't know that.
Yes, I have dairy, shellfish is my most severe, and seafood, which is great because I'm vegan. But the shellfish one is cross-contamination and touch. So that's a tricky one, especially being a chef in non-vegan kitchens, non-all vegan kitchens. And so I always have to be careful, but that's part of what I do in the work that I do now. I'm a vegan chef, and I work with hotels and resorts and put vegan items on their menus and food allergy friendly items on their menus. But a big part of what I do in teaching is food allergy safety. Because it's such a big deal for me, and I know a big deal for so many other people like yourself. And it really limits where you can go and where you feel safe. And I love to travel, and I wanted to continuously travel my whole life. And so I decided to create places that could be safe places to go. And yeah, we just went totally off topic because I'm so sorry.
No, it's A-okay. That's exactly what the purpose of the show is. So in doing my research for this, I saw that you were plant-based from the age of 8. Is that correct? Is that when you were diagnosed with your shellfish?
Yeah, 7, 8. It depends on if you ask my mom or my dad.
Okay.
That's not when I was diagnosed with anything. It was more, I just didn't like eating meat. I didn't like it from early childhood. It was not my thing. And it was at that age that I was at school one day and someone asked if I was a vegetarian, because in my Italian American household, they told me that I was going to die if I didn't eat meat. And so I ran home and I was like, Mom, Dad, there's something called a vegetarian, and there are these people that don't eat meat and they're not dead, and it's going to be great. And I'm a vegetarian. And they were like, oh, great. And so that was a very pivotal point in my life. And I had no idea that would lead to a career at this stage in my life. It was just a decision that I made because it was what was best for me.
That makes a ton of sense. So you go back to your parents' house when you're 7 or 8 years old, depending who you ask. Did they give you an ultimatum and say, Leslie, if you want to be a vegetarian, you need to start cooking? Or when did the maybe culinary bug get you, or when did that really start for you?
Well, like I said, I'm Italian American, so I've been cooking since I could stand. I mean, my great grandma had me at 2, 3 years old on the counter, pushing ravioli dough with her and pizza dough and getting my hands in there and feeling it so that I would know the technique. Because, Italian great grandmothers and grandmothers, they just pour stuff in. They don't measure anything. And so I have these really special memories of her hands on top of my hands, specifically in dough. And so, yeah, cooking has always been a thing in my life. I mean, we always had dinner on the table every day at 6 p.m. There was a homemade meal on the table, no matter what. And so I grew up with that, not thinking that was unique or different. And now as an adult, realizing just how unique and different that was. And so I was always in the kitchen helping my mom, my sisters, my grandma, my great grandma cook whatever we were having that night. And then, yes, when I did just decide to eat meat, my mom was like, okay, you're either going to help or you're going to have spaghetti and tomato sauce every night for the rest of your life. Well, and PB&Js for lunch. And so I got them in the kitchen, and it actually was really pivotal because it also created my style of cooking, because my style of cooking is not using a lot of animal-based product replacers. It's truly using the over 25,000 edible plants on earth that we have in different and unique ways. And so my mom and we used to call them split apart meals, because we would start making the same meal together. And then at one point she would put meat in it and I would put extra veg, or I'd try and come up with something creative to do with my version. And so I was constantly trying to make food that felt very similar and recognizable, but in a different plant-based way. And that has really been the thread through of my cuisine since then.
Okay. And then when did your food allergy diagnosis intersect with your cooking, genesis?
Well, I knew I was lactose intolerant. So when I stopped eating meat, I can't say that I went vegan, because I didn't eat eggs or drink milk, but my mom, being a mom that didn't really want to cater to my every whim, didn't tell me that there were eggs and cookies and muffins and cakes and stuff like that. And she wanted me to have a normal childhood. She wanted me to be able to go to the pizza party and eat a cheese pizza, and said like, oh, it doesn't hurt the cow, you're fine.
Right.
But again, so as I got older and I learned more and I knew better, I kind of did better. But it was kind of in my early 20s where I was like, God, dairy is not my friend at all. And then come to find out years later, it was only like maybe 6 years ago that I got diagnosed with my shellfish allergy. I had a severe reaction to eating crudité and hummus at a restaurant. And I'm like, I eat crudité and hummus all the time. There's nothing, how weird is that? And it turns out that they did this big, giant, beautiful presentation in a seafood tower, but using the same plates, but not using seafood, just using vegetables and dips and hummus. But it turns out that this restaurant did not properly wash their tower and had cross-contamination in their ice that they were using for the shellfish. And this veggie dish that they came up specifically and specially for me. And so that took me to the hospital, which was really wild. Yeah. So I'm very cautious and careful now about how that goes. And it is pretty easy being a vegan chef and making 99% of the food that I eat, that I can tend to stay away from those and not have any harm done. But it is really scary. And there's so many people out there that with far worse allergies than me that have to navigate the airborne allergies. I just feel so much for those people because that's a really hard world to live in. And I just have so much respect for them.
Absolutely. And I know we just completely rabbit hole down.
I will do that.
No.
So I'm just the butterfly here and you have to guide me to where you want to go. Cause I'm just going to keep going wherever I go.
It's great. So
what was the question?
I don't even know at this point. Let's go back then for a second. So I guess as a maybe 10, 20 minute intro for you, you're a world-renowned chef. You're now a consultant, right? For resorts, restaurants, and hotels for vegan, vegetarian, and alternative diets. Is that correct? One sentence of your professional career, at least.
Yes, absolutely. I came from the TV world, which I'm happy to talk about as well. And I decided to change my love of education from science, which is what I was doing before that, and into food. And I didn't want to own a restaurant because I didn't like the idea of that lifestyle. But like I said, I was really trying to solve my own problem. I love traveling, but there were very few places that I felt safe and comfortable traveling to because of cuisine. And I was staying at this hotel once that was very fancy. I was brought down there to speak at a corporate event, and the manager and I had mutual friends. And so we finally found each other on location at the resort. And he said, "Oh, how's the food?" knowing that I was a chef. And I said, "Well, it's actually kind of terrible. I'm ordering like sides and plain salads and trying to piecemeal myself some food." And I was like, with what you're charging for these rooms, you'd think that there'd be a few more options. And he was totally flabbergasted. And we shook hands. And that was the first restaurant or the first resort consulting that I did. And I love it. That program is now the biggest one in the world. It is the most vegan friendly 5-star resort in the world, and it's won a gazillion awards. So I'm super proud of it. But I just really wanted to solve my own problem. They always say like the best entrepreneurs are the ones that solve their own problems. And that was a big one for me. I love to travel and I love to eat.
I couldn't agree more. I want to backtrack for a second, and then I want to jump back to the resort you were at. But you mentioned your background in science. Again, doing my homework, I have a bit of an insight to this, but I think the audience would find it really interesting if you don't mind just maybe giving a quick background of your science background.
We should have led with this. This makes me far more interesting. There's a lot of people out there that are fans of the Bill Nye Show and are very well aware of him. I played Leslie the Lab Girl. I was his little sidekick on the show and got to ask all the silly questions and wear a little lab coat and goggles and play and have fun. And that show is so incredible for so many reasons. And I was so proud of the work that we were doing on it. But like I said, the big pivotal one for me was when that show was coming to an end. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life after that. I was an actor before I was on that show. And I didn't want to go back to acting. And I didn't know what else I would do in the hosting realm. And Bill Nye said to me, "You need to do for food and eating healthy what I did for science." And I said, "I'm sorry." And he goes, "All you do is talk about food. All you do is cook food and bring it to set and talk to me about why I should be vegan." And he wasn't vegan at the time, and he is now, FYI. And Yeah. And I would just go on and on and on and on and on about it. And he was like, you're kind of the perfect person to deliver this healthier message. And I was like, okay. And that's what set me on my chef path and journey. And if you know anything about me, you know that I am not scared of doing anything and pivoting and just getting up one morning and saying, I'm going to leave behind this successful career and go do something else completely, in a career that didn't really exist. When I decided to become a vegan chef, there was one vegan restaurant in Los Angeles. And so, yeah, I mean, just kind of creating something out of nothing is one of my favorite things to do. And it's so fun now to see how much plant-based has caught on. I mean, when I was a kid, there was no non-dairy section in the grocery store. The only non-dairy milk option was rice milk powder that you had to scoop and stir into water. And I'm not even old. It was like overnight, all of a sudden now non-dairy milk sales are higher than dairy sales. And there's Ben and Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs and everybody has vegan options. It's just so fun. It's so cool. There's really, truly no excuses to still be, especially having dairy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I mentioned, I was in the LA area last week, and I went to Erewhon. I think that's how you pronounce it, right? The
Erewhon, yeah.
Erewhon, and there. I mean, I typically shop at like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or the grocery stores in the DC area. There were so many plant-based products that I hadn't even heard of, and I like to think I'm pretty tapped into the space. But there were so many products, brands, derivatives of oat milk that I never even heard of before at that store. It was unbelievable.
It's a huge, huge business now. Which is great and exciting. And I'm super excited to be part of it. And it really just shows the way that the world is going. And, you know, I always tell people you don't have to be 100% plant-based, but plant-based can mean different things to different people. And at the end of the day, especially in this country, we're getting sicker and our quality of life is going down very fast. And, you know, this generation of kids that have already been born are going to have shorter lifespans than their parents, which is the first time of modern history that that's ever happened. And so it's not about vegan is the answer to all of your health problems, but it's the answer to a lot of them. And just increasing your amount of plants that you're eating a day and decreasing the amount of processed foods and animal-based foods that you're having every day can do wonders for your energy level. You feel better, you'll live longer, you get to, you know, be more focused on spending time with your friends and family and kids. And there's really no reason to not do it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, I'm in the same camp as you there. One of the interesting things that you mentioned a minute or two ago was this role of yours, or diving into the world of cuisines. You have almost this creative outlet now. Were you always you had the history in acting. Do you always have that kind of creative in you? I guess to your point with helping your great grandmother making the food in the kitchen from the time you were a kid. But I see the dishes you post on Instagram now. They're incredibly intricate and they look like pieces of art. Have you always had that creative, artistic, nature in you, or is that something that you've had to learn how to do as you've been balancing the cooking aspect of it?
I love being creative, and more so than creative is that I love play. I love learning new things. And again, from my mother and grandmother and great grandmother, I learned all of the handicrafts, they call them, is like the quilting and the crocheting and the knitting and embroidery and needlepoint and all those things that are really lost arts at this point. But it's so beautiful. And it's such a gorgeous creative outlet for people that aren't that creative. Like my whole life, I wish I could be a singer. I would be such a great rock star. I would love to be a singer, but I'm just really not. And that isn't going to be a path for me. But I can be really creative in food, and that is a path for me. And that is something I can do. And so I think just picking the things that you can be creative with and just have fun with. I mean, truly, when you find play in your everyday life, no matter what it is that you do for a job, you can find play in just about anything. And it just brings so much more joy to your life. And so that's kind of what I was taught at a young age, that creativity can bring. And even if it doesn't come naturally to you, I don't think I'm an incredibly artistic person naturally, but my love and passion for play has made me a very creative person. And so even if you don't think that you are, You just have to keep doing the things that you enjoy and finding new things and not being afraid to try new things.
When I was in LA this week, I went into a watch shop. I love watches, and there was this very artistic brand that I hadn't ever heard of before. MB&F is what it's called, and I'm actually getting one of the creative directors on in August or later in August or in September to speak on it. But their brand founder has a quote that a creative adult is just a child that survived. So just, I guess, as a stamp to your point there, it's so true. I mean, if you just keep digging and keep searching for what you enjoy, what you find, it all becomes a lot more playful. So I couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's what keeps people youthful and gives them reason to live. To be honest with you, I'm very close with my grandmother who's still around. She's 94 and a half. And that was it. She never lost her sense of wonder. Even in her 90s, she just was always so curious and excited and had this childlike energy about her because everything was fun. Everything was joyous, and it was all about getting everybody together and having big parties and enjoying life and laughing and playing music and having fun.
I couldn't agree more. What are you curious about right now? What are you what's interesting to you right now that you're trying to stay on the cutting edge of or learn more about that's exciting to you?
In my personal life or in my professional life?
Let's hit both if you want.
Well, let's go with personal first. I am a big fan of Stoicism and the Stoics. I don't know if you know much about them or read much about it. It's the Roman rulers that were philosophers as well. Marcus Aurelius is probably the most famous and my personal favorite. And so right now I'm just going through and reading all of their books and all of their teachings that they left behind for us. And it's just so fascinating to me because in addition to what they say being so applicable to living your life today, the words and the way that they spoke was just so beautiful. And I don't know, it's really enjoyable to read those words. Even when I'm by myself, a lot of times I'll read them out loud because the words just sound so beautiful together.
Yeah, I haven't personally dove into I've seen it, random Marcus Aurelius posts that people or captions that people post on Instagram or different pieces of literature that people screenshot and share, but I haven't dove in. So definitely. Oh,
you need to dive in. He wrote a book called Meditations.
Okay.
I would highly recommend to anyone that's listening and to you.
Of check it out. Yeah, anyone that's listened to the other episodes, I'm kind of going down this path of spirituality and learning more about all of that. I've read The Law of Attraction with Esther Hicks, and I'm reading Frequency right now. And there's a handful of books in that realm that I like. And I think the Stoicism is kind of or Stoicism in that whole category is just a layer on top of that as well.
I think you'll really like it.
Okay, I'm excited to dive in. And then how about for professionally? What are you curious about? What's interesting to you right now?
And then professionally, so I there was no vegan culinary school when I decided to become a chef. So I did not go to culinary school. I couldn't fathom the idea of going to a normal culinary school. And so I took internships and studied and took classes all over the world. And I basically have gone to all of the places that I love the cuisine. I've spent a bunch of time in Peru, Mexico, Indonesia, Thailand, little in Japan, a lot in Europe, obviously Italy, quite a bit. I'm there every year. And right now I'm like really into Middle Eastern and Israeli flavors. And so I'm kind of digging into that world a little bit more. And so I really want to get over there and travel. And I love ancient techniques and family techniques more so than chef techniques. And I'll explain what that is a little bit more. It's more of the techniques that your grandmother and great grandmother were using when they were cooking versus the high tech stuff that's being used today, which I do use some of that as well. I like molecular gastronomy and definitely apply it in some of my cuisine. But I also really, really I collect really interesting vintage cooking instruments from around the world. And I have just weird pots and pans and just utensils and weird things to use because you can be so creative with them and you can feel the history when you're making food with them. So I guess on a personal level or on a professional level, my passion right now is just kind of digging into more worldly cultures and finding out the why behind all of the dishes.
Makes a ton of sense. How do you go about learning I don't remember the exact word you used, but the family style of cooking and preparation as opposed to the more technical aspect of it? Do you go and do you spend time
with families?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really cool because when I first started traveling to learn, I was working in kitchens with chefs and at restaurants. And then they, say like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? Come over and have dinner with my family. And I would meet their parents and I'd be their grandparents and I'd be just so into what they were doing and hearing. And, at family gatherings, they're not having fancy food. They're always having the family traditional recipes. And so I just started digging more and more into that. And I'm just obsessed with food culture. One of my big projects right now is my grandmother was an incredible documentarian of our family recipes. Mm-hmm. And so I'm taking all of her recipes and I'm doing my versions of them. And so I'm veganizing them, making them top 9 free, doing all the things to kind of update them so that those recipes can continue, but in a more modern fashion. So yeah, I don't know, nerding out, but that's
great. Passion. That's terrific. So yeah, I mean, super interesting. I guess for me, I remember always watching No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain, and my dad and I used to watch that on Saturday, Sunday mornings together. He would record it and we would watch it together. But in that show, you can tell, and you brought up a point about how it's almost communal, or it is communal. It's almost like a language. The cooking is almost a language, and I feel like that was the case when I was watching that show. You'd see Anthony go into different countries where they don't speak a lick of the same language. This was before you had your phone and Google Translate and any way of really communicating unless you knew the native tongue. But they go around a stove or they're around a table and it's like they're speaking the same language all of a sudden. And I'm sure that you can resonate or relate to that too, where it doesn't matter if there's no language or if there's a complete language barrier or you speak the same language. You put a good dish in front of someone, I'm sure you can. I mean, there's a reason why the saying break bread exists. And I feel like that's why.
Absolutely. Because as trite as it sounds, food is the language of love. And good food is a transference of love energy from one person to another. And it's why I always have joy in my kitchens. Whenever I'm working in a kitchen or doing an event at a restaurant, there has to be joy. A lot of chefs like it to be super duper quiet and silent and no one says anything. You have the other chefs. I'm sure if you watched the show Chef, you heard like the yes chef, no chef behind, like they have all the secret codes. And then there's like total chaotic diner chefs that just like stuff is flying all over the place. And I don't fall into any of those categories. When I'm in a kitchen, I want nothing but joy. I want people telling me stories about their families. I want music playing and us to be smiling and laughing and dancing and singing along and just people having fun, because that energy goes straight into the food. You have to enjoy what you're making when it comes out. And that is a lost art in restaurants today, because so much of it is about the ratings and the Yelp reviews and the, stars and being on the cover of the magazine and all of the fancy things, that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it is just a transference of love and energy. And that's also what I love about being a vegan chef and focusing on whole, real food, is that it is an exchange of energy. And, there's that saying, never trust a fat chef, or right. Never trust a skinny chef.
I got you.
And I always say never trust a fat chef, because that person doesn't have your best interests at heart. When I cook for somebody, I'm literally giving you health and something that is going to make you better, that is going to add days to your life instead of take them away. And there's so much beauty, and I'm so honored to be a part of people's meals in that way. I don't remember where this question started and where I am now. I told you to just cut me off or I'll just keep talking.
It's exactly the types of conversations that I like to have. I couldn't agree more. And I think to your point about why family style meals are so, or maybe not family style, but family generated meals are so valuable and impactful. And it's, to your point, that transference of love. And I feel like you see that if it's a finely crafted, and the unfortunate thing is that usually when there's some sort of fine or high level craft or high quality ingredients, it ends up raising the cost. So there's that barrier to entry for a lot of maybe low income or even even medium or even high level income folks, but that barrier to entry exists. But that aside, that high quality food, a lot of times you can really truly, if you step away from the face value of it, I feel like you can really taste that the energy, the love that's goes into putting something like that together. And you mentioned celebrating and enjoying being in the kitchen. One of the other points of connectivity and how I've gotten plugged into you and your journey is seeing you connected with Jesse and Sarah and all of their all-day running company mission. So maybe we take a second to dive into that if you'd like.
Yeah,
really cool to watch all of that transcend. Again, I follow a couple of the folks in that crew on social media, and I've had some guests on the podcast that are connected with them as well.
Do you want to tell your audience right now who Sarah and Jesse are?
I'd love for you to give the quick intro, because you probably know them. You definitely know them better than I do.
Oh, well, I adore them. They're two of my favorite people. He's talking about Sarah Blakely and Jesse Itzler. Sarah is the founder of Spanx and one of just the most incredible people you'll ever meet in your life. She's so inspiring to me and has really, truly been a lighthouse. In a time that when I met her, I was not in the best place. So I just absolutely have so much love for her. And her husband, Jesse Itzler, who's actually the reason why I'm connected to them. He found me on Instagram and he asked me to come cook for them. And I said no for about a year. And then I did for an event, and just they surround themselves with the most incredible people. Jesse is an ultra athlete. He has created and sold so many companies, including Zico Coconut Water, Marquee Jets, All Day Running. I mean, his resume is insane. I mean, he was a rapper. He was a manager. He managed Run DMC. Like his resume is bonkers. And so, yeah, they're two of my favorite people in the world to hang out with. And Jesse and I get along really well because he does these really crazy wild adventures. And I say yes to all of them because they always need food on these wild and crazy adventures. And so if you follow them, I'm sure you saw, we just did Ride Across America, where Jesse and some of his friends rode their bikes across America in 14 days. Which was so wild. And I was with them in an RV cooking 10,000 calories per person for a total of 29 people, including crew, every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it was totally insane. It was totally insane. But if you haven't looked at that journey, I would highly recommend going to my page or Jesse's page and going to the highlighted, stories, or going down in our timelines and seeing some of that content, because it was really interesting and cool.
I bring it up because back to what you're mentioning about the transfer of energy, the transfer of love, it was almost tangible through the screen when I was watching those videos. So I'll be sure to plug obviously your socials, but I'll plug those stories as well, because really, really just cool to see. And I'd be curious if you were able to, I'm a big fan of the whole quantified self movement. I wear my Whoop fitness tracker, and I'd be curious if you put someone like Jesse and his crew next to a congruent crew with the same background from a health perspective, and had one on a plant-based diet and one not, what their end result would look like from a physiological perspective. And so that's my nerded out rabbit hole for you there.
Well, it was really interesting, and you can see this in all the stories because the guys are all really honest about it. So Jesse is plant-based, but none of the other guys coming on the ride were. And a lot of them are ultra athletes and really worried about being on a plant-based diet the entire time. And a lot of them felt way more energy. And it was really interesting that the people that were kind of most concerned about it ended up kind of feeling the best. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny because Jesse's also one of the co-owners of the Atlanta Hawks, and they were in the playoffs. So one of the nights, it was so crazy. Like they're riding like 200 miles a day, and the Hawks were in the playoff. And so they decided that Jesse makes everything happen. And so he had this crazy idea in his head that they were going to finish the ride, jump on a private plane, fly to Atlanta, watch the game, sleep for 3 hours, and fly back and get straight on their bikes and go another 200 miles.
Did
and
they
they
do it?
did.
Oh
but
my God.
At the game, some of these guys went crazy on chicken wings and steaks and all this meat. And I shouldn't be laughing, but they got really sick on the plane on the way back because it's like, their engines were running so clean on pure clean energy, and they put in like some dirty gasoline into their car. And They were definitely feeling it the next day.
You had him on a detox, and then that's too funny. That's absolutely crazy. I saw bits and pieces of that, and I mean, like I said, I'll plug the stories because it was an incredible journey, and I'm sure from as a bystander in that and being able to watch it from the sideline. You weren't biking with them, were you?
No, thank God. But I had my own physical challenge happening during that event. The most amount of sleep I got on that 14 days was 4 hours.
Holy
because they were leaving it so early in the morning. They were leaving at like 4:30 in the morning. And the way that we had it worked out is that I had a huge breakfast for them at 4 o'clock in the morning. But also I had lunch ready because I would pack lunch onto the chase vehicles that were staying with them.
Yeah.
And then I'd break down camp, take our vehicles, move them to the next campsite, put everything back up, and have dinner ready by the time they rode there. And it was total insanity. It was total insanity. Like it was, I think I lost 15 pounds in 2 years of my life on that trip, but I'll never forget it. It was truly, truly an incredible experience. And that's what Jesse and I get along, because I just say yes to everything. He called me one day and he was like, Les, I have a wild idea. I was like, yeah, I'm in. And he goes, you don't know what it is. I was like, it doesn't matter. And he goes, we're going to ride our bikes across America. I said, when you say we, are you talking about you and me? And he goes, no, I'm going to do it with my friends and we'd love to have you cook. And I'm like, heck yeah, I'm in. And then it occurred to me, like later in the conversation, I was like, Jesse, doesn't it take like 2 months to ride your bike across America? He goes, the world record's 1 week. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Yeah. And so I cooked all that food in a freaking RV with a sink and a microwave. And I did a pop-up outdoor kitchen every day with burners and barbecues and a giant camping oven. And it was really, really wild.
Was your first meal cooked back in a Four Seasons kitchen just blissful for you after that?
I mean, it was really nice to have counter space again in my life. Yeah, there's nothing like cooking on like 6-foot tables. And I'm not super tall, but I'm 5'9". And so on a folding table, I'm hunched over like crazy trying to chop and prep stuff. I didn't realize that was going to be such a big deal. I needed a much higher counter. And so my back was killing me the whole time. It was really wild. Not to mention that we had 7 women sleeping in the same RV that I was prepping all this food in.
Oh my gosh. That is just wild. That is absolutely wild. Well, I know you've been so gracious with your time. There's one other point of connectivity that I'd love to share.
I feel like we could continue to talk about all of this stuff for another hour.
No, please don't be sorry. I'm grateful for your time. I actually do have a softball game tonight in a little bit. That's the only, not even kidding. That's the only reason why we'll have to cut this a little short.
What position do you play?
They put me out in left field because I never played baseball or t-ball growing up, and so I'm in the place where I can do the least amount of damage on the field.
Oh, I don't know. You got a lot of responsibility out there.
I'll tell you what, catching my first fly ball, I mean, I dropped a couple earlier, and this is my second season. No, second or third, but nonetheless, catching the first fly ball was absolutely exhilarating. You don't really learn too many new things. I'm 26 years old. You're not really learning too many new things or getting those new sensations on a day-to-day basis, but that was really, really a cool experience. I know it sounds trivial, but it really was. No,
I know that feeling so specifically, and that's awesome. That's really awesome. I'm so gled that you're playing.
Oh,
okay, well, then we're done. Go to your game.
No, I've got a few more. Another point of connectivity, and then we can round us out here, is the Four Seasons. And I actually used to intern at the Four Seasons. I have this book on my bookshelf here. The Isadore Sharp book that they gave to all of us. And so I'd love to. So you mentioned you were down at the resort. You talked to the manager and got plugged in there. What's that experience been like for you? Maybe get the audience up to speed on really what your day-to-day looks like today. I know you have a connectivity with a couple of different hotels and restaurant groups, but what does your day-to-day look like today? And how can folks find you if they want to come and experience the Leslie Durso experience?
Well, I don't have a day-to-day. I wish I had a day-to-day, but yeah, there's many places that I work with now. The one that you're talking about is the Four Seasons Punta Mita, Mexico, which is just heaven on earth. I was just down there last week, and it's just one of the most special places in the world. That also is what I was mentioning. It's the most vegan friendly 5-star resort in the world, and also incredibly food allergy friendly. We can accommodate anything. And yeah, the people down there are just magical. The food is incredible, so fresh and delicious. I highly, highly recommend it. And as far as like what my typical is, there is no typical, because I do so many different things in part of my career. And, you know, meeting Sarah and Jesse, I met them in 2020 in person, and I did my first event for them. And I was like, oh, I'm only going to do this until the pandemic's over, because then I'll be back to doing hotels full time. But I just love the adventures that they do. And I never in my wildest dreams, I loathe the idea of private chefing, and which is why I told them no for a year before I said yes. And I only said yes because it was during the pandemic and I had nothing else to do. But I love doing adventures with them. I'm really excited for our next event together. I'm actually not going to be cooking, but I'm going to be speaking. And so if anybody wants to come to Running Man, I don't know if you've heard about it.
No, I haven't.
Jesse's answer to a giant festival. It is, there is going to be running at all the different levels. I'm not a runner. I'm going to walk a bunch of it. But they've created the world's largest sauna. There'll be cold plunges. Tons of really interesting speakers are coming. There's tons of musical guests that are coming. It's just going to be like an awesome festival. And it's all in this open field in Georgia. And they've got tents set up. I mean, you really just need to come, fly in, get yourself there. They take care of the food. They take care of the tents. They take care of everything. And one thing that I will say about Jesse, and then we can finish off, but he has the ability to create such beautiful community. And every person I've ever met through him has been so incredible. They're all people that just lead with love and have zero egos. You have no idea if you're talking to a world leader, if you're talking to a mom of 4 that's a stay-at-home mom, or if you're talking to, I mean, I've met so many fascinating, interesting people through him. So it's a really, really, really good place to be. I highly, highly recommend it. So come, it's October 17, 18, 19 in Georgia. And I'd love to see you guys there. You should come.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll plug it into the show notes as well for anyone interested. And sounds like an incredible event.
It's gonna be so fun. I mean, who else can say they're going to go in the world's largest sauna?
Yeah, that sounds. I just got into the sauna game. It's pretty game changing.
Oh, it's life changing for sure, for sure.
Well, Leslie, I'm so appreciative of your time. I know it took a little while to get this on the books, and yeah, and I'm glad you were able to escape the hurricane, or maybe follow it a little bit, but. Nonetheless, really appreciate you hopping on, and hopefully I can see you in October. But for those who are not, or were not familiar with you before this, and they are now, they want to go follow you, where can they find you on social media or your website, what have you?
Everything is Leslie Durso, LESLIEDURSO. Instagram and YouTube are probably the most fun places to follow me. My website is just some general information, but definitely connect with me on social media. I also have a habit of responding to every single DM that comes to me, as long as it's clean and not dirty. I try and answer every single question that comes in. So if you need help with anything, I'm here for you.
Awesome. Well, Leslie, thank you so much again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.